in Wallaceburg, Ontario today. So we are between Chatham, Kent, and Sarnia. And Deniece, where are you today?
Toronto, Ontario.
Toronto, Ontario.
West side.
West side.
West side.
All right, so I'm going to share a screen here. I should probably have flipped that to the right spot, but oh well, that's my Twitter.
There you go. There's Ben's Twitter.
Oh well, that's my Twitter. That's fine. I was tweeting out about the session today,
Yeah.
which is support for the revised health and physical education curriculum. Session 2 is an overview of the changes for the primary grades. So we're excited about that, to jump into that information. But before that information sharing, we want to do our territorial acknowledgement.
So this is our local territorial acknowledgement that we do in Lambton and Kent. We acknowledge that the land on which we are gathered is part of the traditional territory of the Chippewa, the Ottawa, and Potawatomi and Delaware nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. So today on the Zoom session with us is Deniece in Toronto, and Mary Lynn Anderson, and I'm Ben Hazard. So Deniece is with OPHEA. Mary Lynn, what's your role?
Well, my big long title is System Coordinator of Student Achievement / Elementary. So what that means is basic, and I'm a system principal. So I was principal of schools, and now I work at the board office with Ben and all over our district. And we work on programs. So basically anything to do with curriculum, which is why we're here today, because this has to do with our phys ed and health curriculum. Ben and I sort of oversee that, as well as our early years.
Yeah, and so I get to work with Mary Lynn. That's a privilege. And Deniece, you're with OPHEA. So I'll let you take away the sharing capabilities, and you can say your connection to everyone.
All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. My connection to OPHEA, I'm an ambassador for them. So I deliver workshops and advocacy role for the implementation of health and physical education. And I work with the Peel District School Board. I've been with them for about 7 to 10 years. I can't remember, somewhere in there. I was just saying that I spent 5 years in the United States, in Connecticut, and then another 3 in Syracuse City District, Syracuse District. So my passion, health and physical education. And I have a master's in education, which sometimes comes in handy to keep those kids in line.
That's right. Yeah, whatever you need, you just pull out the giant degree.
Yeah.
You realize I have my master's in education.
Yep.
You know, I'm a master of education. That's...
And then they look at me and they say, so is that Kung Fu?
I tried the same thing without any impact.
Okay.
More persuasive. Yep.
Yeah,
okay.
So if you look at the chat box, I've just put in a question. So something for people to think about as they go through the webinar, which is just a memory of your own experience as it relates to human development and sexual health. So I am going to share my screen, bring up that presentation, and then ask, I guess, Rod and Mary Lynn, if you have any comments about that.
I can put in mine.
All right, go ahead. You want to just say it or that? Because we can't see that later.
Okay.
So read them out, so.
Yeah, just say it. That's right.
Okay, so I'm likely the oldest in the crowd here today. And so we were separated, boys and girls, if I think about sexual health. And in, I think, grade 5, might have been 5, might have been 6. Yeah. And boys went to a room and girls stayed in the room and learned about periods. That was about it, I think. I don't think we did any formal learning really about what I would call sexual health. So, yeah.
So Rod says he remembers being segregated, male and female as well.
Yeah.
So I remember the segregation of that. I remember coloring sheets of the anatomy.
Oh, yes.
Boring.
Yeah, so coloring and learning the naming conventions. And I remember like once got into high school, you got a little more detail. I remember grade 9 being a very influential moment of, you know, much more of the sexual health part of the equation.
Mhm.
Human development seemed to be a little more in my rural elementary school growing up.
I don't remember anything in high school.
Oh, I remember the birth of a baby.
Oh,
Yes, I remember that as well.
see, you're younger than I, so they were getting.
Stands out for me. Fantastic. So just for others to sort of think about that experience, was it positive, negative, uncertainty? How do you think your instructor who was delivering that felt? And in an effort for us to hopefully create some more open dialogue.
Yeah, I'll read this one out for you, Deniece. Rod says there was very little public in the media regarding sexuality as well. And I think that's a pretty fair comment. It was such a quiet topic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everything about it, actually. Like, so when I said periods, that wasn't on commercials, even the way it is today. So there was nothing.
I see. Yes, that's fair. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And it's the first in a series of 3 where we sort of separate the information based on division of, can you see the screen there? Yeah, okay. Based on how the curriculum is laid out. So next week we'll be doing junior, following week senior, or intermediate, and then a little bit of work on mental health and physical education.
All right, perfect.
So by the end of today, we'd like you to have a clear understanding of strand B, the components and how they relate to healthy living. Feel more confident and comfortable implementing key concepts within human development to support the curriculum, and have an increased awareness of the additional resources that are available. So at the end of each presentation, we'll put up that last slide that has some links. But if anybody has other things that they've used before, please feel free to share those as well. And what has been updated? Last webinar, we spoke about this overview of the strand A, social emotional learning skills, and how it's the umbrella for all the other strands, the subsequent strands: active living, movement competence, and healthy living. In connection with human development and sexual health, you'll find that there is an introduction to the basic health concepts and opportunities for the elementary students to apply this knowledge to decisions about their own health. The goal is for them to make connections between their physical and mental health, their well-being, and their interactions with others around the world. So it's not just, hey, we're in phys ed class and we need to be fit, and then we go to health class and we separate that and we're just going to talk about our bodies. But really, can they make the connections and see how they overlap, especially with regards to the social emotional learning skills? You learn about the importance of consent, how to stand up for themselves, how to listen and respect others, and how to get help in situations that involve bullying or abuse when they feel uncomfortable, confused, or unsafe. And as Rod sort of mentioned in the news, they learn the names of body parts, and it's part of life. And so our job as educators isn't to attach value to it, but simply to say this is who we are. And in science class, we talk about systems in a little bit more of an advanced way and how they work and are connected. And that's really the same idea that we're trying to get at in health and phys ed and implementing the curriculum, is that it's a way for students to advocate for themselves. And if they know how to do that and what they're talking about, then they can take care of themselves. And they can understand and appreciate how their bodies work. And lastly, just understanding that the factors that contribute to healthy physical, social, and emotional development. Page 89 to 92 of the curriculum really highlights all of those things that I just spoke to. If you had any more questions about that. Any comments, concerns?
I used the word, when I taught this, so many years later, and I wasn't segregating the boys and the girls away from each other and taught it in the junior grades. I used that science analogy with them as well and just said, this is science. This isn't anything that we don't talk about when we talk about animals, and we are, human beings are a type of animal, and this is just science. And that helped, I think, them get over the whole giggly, embarrassing kind of moments if they could kind of think of it that way. So I like it that you referred to it that way too, Deniece.
And you did mention separating and segregating the students, and I think that there is a time and place for that. And for the application for teachers, it's also a level of comfort. So when you're getting into the higher grades, and we'll talk about that, providing an opportunity for that safe space to ask questions, and not to downplay for little people who are also feeling somewhat, for some, unsure of what's happening for their bodies, and they're an only child and they don't know about body parts or whatever it may be. Having a place to say and talk to their teacher or whoever else as a trusted adult they're engaging with. So we're going to look at the specific expectations in the primary grades. And if you look at the grade 1 example here, we're going to revisit how it's presented, where you can do horizontal learning by topic. And then you can also do the vertical learning. So you're going across and then up and down here. Okay. It's cross-referenced to the 5 health content areas. And in general, you can plan it in an integrated way, and very much like what Mary Lynn said, if you're a I say homeroom, but if you're a teacher who is a classroom teacher in multiple subjects, there's an opportunity for you to integrate how these students are making connections. That's the big focus right there, and helping them to apply their knowledge. So that would be health topic focus is the next opportunity, where you just say, we're going to work on healthy eating. And that's going to be an example of hunger and thirst cues in grade 1 and healthy eating. And the vertical activity would be looking at the food guide, and we're looking at safe choices in school, and then we're looking about procedures for hand washing and hygiene. And that would be how to make decisions across all of these sections, right? All right. I'm going to erase the ink. Any questions, comments, concerns on that? Vertical and horizontal learning.
Makes sense. I like also linking back to what you had said, Deniece, about how, maybe we felt health was very segmented from the phys ed thing. If we do a more integrated approach and bring it in as it fits, using this chart for each of the grades, it's a way that it doesn't just become a one-off moment where it's the dreaded health, whatever that might be in that grade level. This can be part of the learning, and just kind of weaves through many things. I look at the current events and talking about being safe and well-being in with illness. Things that you'd mentioned so far are all part of that as well. So there's lots of ways that we can integrate this throughout lots of the school day. And I know in our district we have many folks who teach their class for most of their subjects. So this would be an opportunity that could present itself.
That's fantastic. Even with the human development and sexual health in relation to math, I know that there's a big focus on numeracy and literacy there. But for one of our geometry units, it's using body parts to, I say body parts, but just in terms of like your arms and your legs, and being able to talk about those senses and functions, and creating a presentation on that. So you're tying in a little bit of geometry with human development, and it's not about your private parts, as they say. It's just bodies in general.
Yeah.
Strand D, We revisited this slide here, and it's just a quick glance through about some of those topics that we'll be diving further into and the concepts that we'll be addressing. And I will present an image of the updated food guide, but again, it's something that you can access online and through our last slide that we present, going to Canada's website and the cannabis resources that are provided through OPHEA to help support the curriculum as well. School policy on when to teach, what needs to be sent home, and how to deal with exemptions.
Absolutely.
So it's been deemed optional to some degree, in the sense that you need the policy program memorandum has been put in place, PPM 162. Just let me make sure of my information here. And the direction is for school boards to share the information in relation to health lessons. And the time frame is determined by your school board. So in Lambton, Kent, sorry, I'm not familiar with the exact steps that you take, but your exemption process is clearly marked on your page. So then it's up to the individual schools to figure out how they want to disseminate that information as well.
You want to just
speak to that, please.
Sharing button right now. If you want to just unshare, I'll share. I've got it pulled up so that I can just share with you the local context here.
Perfect. Thank you.
So if you go to the LKDSB website, you go board, and then you go to the policy procedures, you can find this, which is our admin procedure on this. So principals will know about this, but it's good for everyone to know. So it talks about the limitations of the exemption as well. So it's not from all curriculum, or all of health as well. It's actually from very specific what that focus looks like. So it explains what that looks like for you and around the communication. So we aligned with the PPM, Deniece?
Yes, completely.
PPM is exactly what we used. It's need a notice, a period of instruction at least 20 days prior to instruction.
Yes.
And we've said that you just can use your normal communication methods. For some folks that's online, that's like seesaw or email, depends on the classroom. And we've actually collated all of the expectations so that people can see.
Oh,
so we're
fabulous.
Yeah, so people can take a look and say that's what we're actually talking about. Because we find a lot of the times when we talk with families, as a principal, I would talk with families about this topic, especially with its media buzz over the last number of years. And once we actually read what the curriculum was, it was actually less concerning than they had thought. So we just collated it all together so you can go through and see all that and then share that. And then I'm just flipping so people can see that. Then we have the actual exemption little form that can be sent out and all the related documentation. So that stuff is on the LKDSB webpage for folks, Deniece, and we would encourage that to be followed because that's a way for us to communicate well. And in fact, we've had very positive response from our community and from our families around participating in the HPE curriculum. And it's what actually rather well. We did a quick survey of principals the other day. Not many concerns that way. So it's a good thing, and I think it's good for the well-being of our students.
Fantastic. Super clear and similar in the Peel District School Board. We have a widget on our page that has forms accessible for teachers, and most in our area have been instructed to tackle the subject in the latter portion of the school year. So typically we do that after March break, just so that students have had an opportunity to develop some comfort and familiarity with their peers and with their classroom teachers, whoever will be instructing them. So
even educator comfort as well, I'd suggest, Deniece. Like there's that moment, like, to launch into this, I would explain to parents often, this isn't like the second week of school here, folks. We've got some time to figure this out, make sure we're comfortable, make sure we've communicated clearly, because the teacher also wants to have a certain level of comfort and understanding of the dynamics within the classroom, and of make sure that they're doing the appropriate based on the learning needed in their classroom.
Fabulous, fantastic. So on that note of comfort and safety, I'm going to flip back to our next little segment, which is just a video clip from OPHEA that talks about, we mentioned the 5 fundamental principles in the last webinar, and this pulls one of them out, which is creating a physically and emotionally safe classroom. So that way you can start to feel that students and teachers will be responsive, respectful, and have an open line of communication, no matter what the grade is in that sense. So here we go. Go back to sharing.
This is like some pro-star online facilitating. We just passed the share button between each other. Now you're doing a video. This is great.
The importance of physical safety, but also by ensuring emotional.
To try again.
Educators can provide a safe environment by not only emphasizing the importance of physical safety, but also by ensuring emotional and social safety. By fostering a respectful and inclusive learning environment where all students' needs are considered, students will feel like they belong.
While we have visible and invisible differences, they all have a place within the classroom, and all of our students can learn from each other.
We need to be respectful about how we say things in the classroom. So not everybody has a mommy and daddy. So maybe somebody's living with their aunt and uncle. So we just like to be aware of the vocabulary and understand that the big picture is how do we interact with people in the world, not necessarily just playing a game.
Students will go far with you with respect to, taking a lesson outside the box, but they have to feel safe.
Getting to know your students is an important basis for providing an inclusive learning environment, which helps them achieve their full potential.
Unlike other subjects, phys ed is where you're kind of showing your abilities in front of everyone. So, and able to set up a safe classroom.
All right. So that's just a little bit of an introduction to one of the videos that dives deeper into the fundamental principles that OPHEA, the videos made to support what the curriculum has, and giving teachers an opportunity to share with each other, how do we get this done? How do we make our classroom accessible and safe? Okay. So in the spirit of creating that physically and emotionally safe environment, talk about gender identity and gender expression, and how do we create entry points for students starting from grade 1 and up. Most people think that that's simply an intermediate discussion. So there are a number of expectations where it could end up that you have an opportunity to use some language that we talked about in the last webinar about creating more of an open dialogue before we put a box around how people see what is out in the world. So in grade 1, body parts, as we talk about it, you say bodies with penises or people with penises, rather than boys have penises, girls have vaginas, and vulvas, right? So it just sort of opens it up for, we are all individuals and we don't know what everybody's going through, and we wear these clothes, and at the end of the day, they're private parts. And so if you know what parts are where, you have that opportunity to talk to somebody if you're feeling threatened. In grade 3, Heather spoke to visible and invisible differences. We could say parents and caregivers, rather than saying, please give this to your mom and dad. And I say that I learned that lesson the hard way when I had a family of 5 students and their mother passed away. So it didn't even have to do with same-sex families. I've had foster students that I've taught, and all of those just create a sense of belonging for them, rather than feeling like that constant reminder of something's missing in my family and it's not good enough. Content across the curriculum. Here's an example. It's full of words, but basically understanding consent. So recognize caring behaviors, recognize behaviors can be harmful, and then describing the feelings that are associated with that. And what we've implemented, every district does it a little bit differently, but zones and regulation and self-regulation, not just in health and phys ed and human development and sexual health. If we have these social emotional learning skills in place and intact throughout the school, the environment and the community just operates a little bit better. So this grade 1 example is foundational to everything that progresses with this strand in human development and sexual health. Questions, comments?
I like that connection to the zones. We see that language in many of our elementary schools currently, and how, like, you know, self-regulation isn't just a health and sexual development kind of conversation. It's also just about what we do day to day, moment to moment, as we self-regulate and understand how we're responding to whatever's occurring in our environment and how we're feeling.
Yep. Yeah. And that also is another point, just to mention that in the primary grades, it tends to show itself with consent more with safety than in human development and sexual health, but they overlap, as you can see, with relationships and coping. And great. So we're going to look at one of the strands, one of the expectations here, and it is 1.3 body parts. And it's a funny topic. No matter what the grade is, there is a response from the kids when you talk about things that are quote typically taboo. Like Mary Lynn said, you didn't see or hear about periods in commercials. And so it's not a laughing subject, but that's a typical response for people when they're uncomfortable, is they laugh and they giggle. So again, providing that opportunity for kids to express their emotions and self-regulate and understand that, okay, we've gotten through that. Now, how can we learn? This strand, identifying body parts, including genitalia, using correct terminology, gives you the teacher prompt, and it asks you to engage the kids. Why is this important? Like, why does it matter? And the example prompt is for kids to understand, if somebody touches you that you don't want them to, or if you're hurt, if you need help, you can tell someone, and they're going to know, because you don't know that mommy or auntie or my sister calls whatever genitalia a nickname or fake name. So not fake name, but a hidden name. And so that allows the students an opportunity to say, I can fend for myself and I can advocate for myself. Doesn't change, 2 times 2 is 4, and we have an outline of an anatomy here, and the lesson plan helps you to identify and unpack what it means for certain parts to be private, and then it sets up students who are a little bit uncomfortable or who haven't discussed this topic at home, an opportunity to have something tangible that they can refer back to and or talk to the trusted adult about. These lesson plans you all have access to, and my colleague, or I think someone, is going to enter that link in the chat room.
Kristen has, it's teachingtools.ophea.net/lesson-plans/HPE-new for those tuning in at a different time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And I will pull up a couple of those lesson plans just to show you that the parts that are highlighted in green have been updated and are new. And sometimes people need or appreciate a visual of just click, click, click. This is where I need to go. In grade 2, this is from Healthy Living and Human Development and Sexual Health again. And the social emotional learning skill that's tagged here is self. And I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper about the definition of self. Anybody want to chime in, or I can just go for it? Okay, So knowing who we are and having a sense of purpose, meaning in our lives helps us to function as self-aware individuals. Most of us were sort of instructed with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And for self-actualization to occur, we need to understand a sense of identity. It helps us to make choices, support our well-being, and connect and feel like we belong in different cultural, social communities. So one thing for educators is for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students, the term sense of identity and belonging could also mean belonging to and identifying with a particular community and or nation. So that's very important to recognize. And self-awareness and identity skills help students explore who they are. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses or barriers or difficulties? What do I prefer? What are my ambitions? What are my values? And then being able to know how your social and cultural contexts influence you. When I was in Connecticut, it was very different with a very homogenous classroom. And then teaching in Peel, like I mentioned in the last webinar with regards to sport, cricket was new for me, something that I didn't really understand. So providing an opportunity for that inclusivity and community feeling to exist would be talking about some dishes when we're in healthy eating, and what are some ways that we can make that new plate with veggies, you know, bok choy instead of just Romanian lettuce. And then talking about roti versus a pita and Wonder Bread. So I just think once the students have that value, that who they are is important and they belong, they'll learn new skills, they'll monitor their progress, they'll identify their strengths, and then we can, as educators, play a key role in helping them to bring value to the classroom. What you say matters. And that's also for you to check out in the curriculum. Page 104, I believe, talks to that. The thought of self. So as we understand who we are and the sense of self, we're just continuing to build on that. How does your body change and grow? What helps you to grow and be healthy? So very linear and linear understanding of it. You get bigger, you go faster, are those examples. So how can we engage students to think critically about that? Well, we can think about different cultures. So what does it mean to grow? And again, bringing in the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit cultures. Indigenous communities have rites of passages and teaching the responsibilities. 7 stages of life that exists, and grandfather teachings and elders. And how is that similar or different from your own culture? So it's an engaging activity. So students, one that we've thought of and presented for this particular strand is a comic strip. So what would happen if we kept on growing? And rather than just drawing 4 boxes of I'm a baby and I'm 3 feet tall and then I'm 4 feet tall and 5 feet tall, it encourages different entry points, and then share with your peers. So yeah, just what would happen? It's an inquiry-based question, and you explore the possibilities, and then from there, keep diving into what you've discovered.
Yeah, it's a great learning opportunity. And Deniece, in our district, we are able to partner with 4 nations, which is part of our territorial acknowledgement, but also part of our understanding has come from things that were on the previous slide and in the curriculum, like the grandfather teachings. So before some of those things are done, we really encourage engaging with our, for the elementary place, our elementary Indigenous liaison, Gretchen Sands Gamble, who can connect us with elders, who can provide some wisdom around how those things are, because some of those things are some sacred teachings that we
Yes.
just need to be really aware of, rather than going to a lesson plan on something like the 7 grandfather teachings within this. It's really good to, it's always good to engage within our Indigenous partners and community members and elders, and make sure that we're honoring the voices and ensuring that we're including them in their story.
Fantastic. That's really a wonderful opportunity to live that rather than just here's a piece of paper or somebody else. Really cool. Grade 3. So healthy relationships, responding to bullying, the SEL strands, emotions, coping, again, relationships, and talking about or describing visible and invisible differences, which again, you saw was addressed in Fundamental Principles video, which was made a couple years ago, but is still relevant as always. So it's a really good reminder. There's skin, there's hair, eye color, facial features, body size, invisible differences, learning abilities, talents, cultural values, mental illness, and just a way of showing that everybody's unique, right? And celebrating those differences. And I refer back to Connecticut where I thought, well, there aren't any students that look like me, or there's one student that looks like me, but when you really look at those invisible differences, I had an amazing group of students, and it allowed us to really celebrate those differences as well. Teacher prompt, you can kind of skim and scan that. This one is focused on what might make people unique. Who we love is the one that they've pulled out, but it's how we learn, what we think, and what we're able to do. Some live with parents who are married, some have parents who live apart, grandparents, caregivers, faith, background, and examples of the families. And one example, again, just starting with discussion. Heather Has Two Mommies, the book that I like to read. And you can discuss the visible and invisible differences within families. So whether or not your particular class at that time has an individual with same-sex parents, it's important to provide exposure, have conversations, and just let students know that the world is a very big place and there are lots of types of individuals and how they live that are out there. And Heather realizes that all of the different families are unique and they're special in their own way. So I really enjoy that book. Another family is a family is a family, and that identifies a child who has a foster mother. So those are just using, again, that literature. So you're integrating that within the health and phys ed curriculum. Any books that you two have heard of? 3, 4, 5 people? Whoever's out there?
I have. I'm terrible at remembering type, however, Deniece. So
That's okay.
I had a librarian in my last school who was very good at bringing that type of book in for students to learn about different types of families and different types of individuals. So for young kids. So so I did a lot of reading of those books, but right now their titles will not. There's no way. I just know me. I won't be able to think of them. So
it's an ever-changing genre with lots of different things that are being created. I think if you go back to the curriculum, you can pull out key things that are in here. Families that live together, live apart, 2 parents, some live with 1, different. Like there's the variety here that in this expectation for the student prompt does help us understand that a little bit as well, on how we can make sure that we're representing all varieties within our literature that we're sharing with students.
Definitely. And then again, I'd like to speak to some of those personal examples when I have students of color that comment on, Bell, you changed your hairstyle again. And it's just something where there's that point of connection where, oh yeah, not having a good hair day today. And then providing some of those books to talk about the visible and invisible differences. And broaching those conversations without having students feel like they're being centered out, but more of a celebration of who they are.
Yeah.
And being able, like you said at the start, to do that as an educator as well. I don't feel comfortable, and I tell the kids that there are times where I might say pass, and it's okay to pass on a topic that you don't feel uncomfortable with, that you don't feel comfortable with. And as an adult, I respect your decision, and it would be lovely for you to respect mine as well.
Yeah.
So we will wrap up with those resources again. Ministry of Education, information for parents, the Growing Success document, and School Mental Health Ontario are all valuable resources. I did not click on the curriculum this time around. I'll probably revisit it for a little bit in the subsequent seminar, just to pull out a few points. Your program blog, which is amazing. OPHEA, so supporting physical and health educators. OPHEA has a number of webinars that are out there, not just on human development and sexual health, but the other topics as well. And the teaching tools, OPHEA.net, is outstanding as well. I will provide you with a lesson that you can sort of look through. And EGAL is for your gender diverse child. So there are also webinars and e-learning through egal.ca, learn.egal.ca. And then we wrap up just by saying, the new lesson plans will be updated in green. I'll show that to you as an example. Healthy eating plans were developed. Cannabis education resources are available. And if you have any other questions, comments, concerns, or anything that you feel you want us to address prior to webinar 3, shoot us a quick line and we will hopefully be able to accommodate that.
Absolutely. So if you can release the share button, Deniece, then I will share the last couple slides. There we go. And we are just from Toronto to Wallaceburg. My goodness, we're going down the 401 here,
Yep.
sharing on Zoom. So Deniece has provided lots of, I also, interesting, last night we were sitting with my family in the evening after we kind of all got back from our activities. And there was a CAA magazine that there was cannabis items in there.
Ah.
So it's so interesting. So like, I think that the other part is that going back to Rod's comment about just how it wasn't, certain things weren't visible in media. I think some of this is so visible all the time, and with things like digital media and then even traditional media, like magazine type items, there's a lot more sharing of lots of these concepts. The more we can share and give students a framework to understand, I think the better that is. But we hope we've given you, as educator or somebody participating, a framework to understand the new curriculum. Deniece has been fantastic with that. We want to hear feedback from you. If you go to tinyurl.com/HPE1 LKDSB, these will be archived and put on our website after the fact so that we can continue that process. And Deniece, thank you. That was excellent. We appreciate your willingness to share, bringing your perspective, but also letting us slide in and connect in our LKDSB items as well. It's nice to have the expertise with the local flavor as well. So thank you for that.
Yes, thanks, Deniece.
Outstanding. Thank you all. Celebrate our differences.
That's right.
Have
All
a
right.
good evening.
You too.
You too.